Welcome to the Deep Dives. You sent us a really interesting research paper. It's titled To Trace or Not to Trace? Mimicry in Timed Multimedia Lessons with Pointing and Tracing.
Yeah, from Educational Psychology Review. Great find.
It really is. And that title, it throws up a question right away, doesn't it? Does, like, physically copying hand movements you see on screen, pointing, tracing, does that always help you learn better from a multimedia lesson?
That's the core puzzle. We're going to try and unpack that today for you.
Because it seems like it should help, right? That physical engagement thing.
Exactly. Feels intuitive. And, a lot of earlier research did suggest that gestures like pointing or tracing can boost learning. The paper mentions this too.
Right, across different subjects, math, health sciences.
Yeah, even language learning. But that was often with static stuff, like paper worksheets or fixed images on a computer.
Okay, static materials. That's a key difference, maybe. Because this study you sent us, it looked at something else.
It did.
Yeah.
It zeroed in on mimicking these gestures, the pointing, the tracing, but in a very specific setting. Timed multimedia lessons about geometry, all happening on an iPad.
Timed lessons.
Yeah.
On an iPad. Okay, so dynamic video examples, not static pages.
Precisely. Think short video clips showing how to solve problems, and the people in the study either copied the hand movements they saw or they just watched.
And this is where things get unexpected, based on that older research.
Totally unexpected, because the main finding, the real headline here, was that the group who mimicked the gestures, they actually performed worse on the tests later.
Worse. Not just no better, but actually worse.
Worse, compared to the group who just passively observed the gestures on screen.
Wow. Okay, that definitely goes against the grain.
Mm.
So the big question we're tackling for you is why? Why would copying the movements hurt learning here?
That's what the researchers trying to figure out. They explored a few possible explanations, and understanding these is really the key.
All right, let's get into them. What's the first idea?
One main one they discuss is gesture redundancy.
Redundancy. Okay, so like doing something that's already being done.
Exactly. The video itself, the multimedia lesson, it already shows the pointing and tracing. The instructor's hand, or a cursor, is visually guiding your attention.
Right, the information is already there visually.
So if you then physically copy that exact same movement with your own finger on the screen, you're not really adding any new information. It's redundant.
It's like repeating something that's already perfectly clear, maybe even distracting.
It could be. And worse, it might create unnecessary cognitive load.
Cognitive load, that's about mental effort, right?
Yes. Think of it like this. You have limited mental bandwidth. Some effort goes into actually understanding the geometry that's good, germane load, but some effort might go into things that don't help you learn.
Like trying really hard to perfectly trace a line on the iPad screen at the exact same time as the video.
Precisely. That effort, trying to coordinate your movement with the video perfectly, that's extraneous as cognitive load. It's mental work that doesn't actually contribute to understanding the geometry concept itself.
And it might even steal resources away from understanding the concept.
That's the idea. If you're focused on the physical act of mimicking, especially if it feels awkward or rushed, you might have less mental capacity left over to actually process the explanation.
Okay, so the gesture is redundant, and the act of doing it adds unhelpful mental clutter. That makes sense. Does that link to trying to manage different things at once?
Absolutely. That's another big piece of the puzzle. You're watching the screen, processing the visual information, the steps of the problem, the explanations.
And also trying to coordinate your own hand movements to match what you're seeing.
Right. You're juggling visual input, auditory input perhaps, and your own motor output. That's a lot to manage simultaneously.
Especially, I guess, if it's timed. You mentioned these were timed examples.
Crucially, yes. These weren't leisurely self-paced lessons. They were timed video clips. So there's pressure.
Pressure to keep up with the video and accurately mimic the gestures.
Exactly. That time pressure likely magnifies the difficulty of juggling those different tasks, watching, listening, understanding, and physically mimicking. It could easily lead to feeling overwhelmed.
I can almost feel that. Trying to trace something quickly while also trying to grasp, I don't know, an angle theorem. It sounds stressful.
It likely is. You might end up doing the mimicking poorly or missing key parts of the explanation, or both. The timing aspect seems really critical here.
Okay, so redundancy, cognitive overload from juggling tasks, and the time pressure. Anything else they considered?
There was one more interesting possibility they raised. What if the multimedia lessons themselves were just really good?
Pretty well designed, you mean? Optimized.
Yeah. Think about it. If the video explanation uses, say, very clear highlighting, smooth animations showing exactly where to look, concise narration, if it's already doing a fantastic job of guiding your attention and explaining the concepts,
Then maybe adding your own physical tracing doesn't actually add anything useful.
it might not. If the visual cues are already optimal, the learner physically reinforcing them might be, at best, unnecessary.
And at worst, maybe even a distraction. Like, it breaks your focus from the well-presented information.
That's plausible. If the lesson is already super clear, forcing yourself to do this extra physical action might just disrupt your flow of concentration on the actual learning material.
Huh. So the effectiveness of the mimicry might depend heavily on how good the original instruction is.
It seems that way. In less clear or less dynamic instruction, maybe the physical action would help focus attention. But here, with potentially optimized multimedia, maybe not.
This really paints a picture where context is everything. The type of material, the way it's presented, the timing, it all interacts.
Absolutely. It challenges the simple idea that active is always better. The type of activity matters immensely, and whether it actually supports the learning goal in that specific context.
So linking back to that cognitive load idea, in this specific case, mimicking seems to have increased the extraneous load, the unhelpful effort.
Without necessarily boosting the germane load, which is the effort that leads to real understanding and schema building.
It just added a task that wasn't helping and might have actually gotten in the way of learning the geometry.
That seems to be the most likely explanation based on their findings. It's a cautionary tale about applying learning strategies universally without considering the specifics.
It definitely makes me pause and think. I sometimes feel like I should be doing something physical when watching educational videos, like note-taking or,
Yeah.
well, tracing things.
It's a common instinct, I think. We want to be engaged. But this research suggests that for certain kinds of content-timed, visually guided multimedia, simply observing carefully might be more effective than forced physical interaction.
So the advice isn't never use gestures, but think carefully about when and how they're used.
Precisely. And consider whether the way the information is already being presented makes that physical action helpful or just extra work.
Did the paper suggest where research should go next, given these surprising results?
Yeah, they did. They pointed towards exploring this in more complex multimedia environments.
More complex. How so?
Well, perhaps learning tasks that involve more steps, or maybe systems that are more interactive where the learner has more control. It raises the question, could mimicking be beneficial in those situations?
Maybe if the task is really complex, the physical act of tracing or pointing could help you segment it or focus on tricky details, like an anchor point.
That's a possibility worth exploring. Maybe the cognitive benefits of grounding the action physically become more valuable when the information itself is more demanding or less clearly guided than in these specific geometry examples.
So, still more to learn about how gesture and multimedia interact in different settings.
Definitely. This study provides a really valuable specific data point, but it also opens up new questions for different contexts.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the key insight here for our listener. We started by asking if mimicking gestures always helps with multimedia learning.
And based on this research, focusing on timed geometry lessons on an iPad with clear visual cues, the answer seems to be, surprisingly, no.
Not just no, but it could actually be detrimental.
Right. The big takeaway isn't just that it didn't help it actively hurt performance compared to just watching. Participants who mimicked learned less effectively.
And the likely reason seemed to be that the gesture was redundant because it was already shown visually.
Doing it added extra cognitive load, making it harder to process the actual geometry.
The time pressure made juggling watching and doing difficult.
And potentially, the learning materials were already so well designed that the mimicking added no value and might have even been distracting.
It really underscores that learning strategies aren't one-size-fits-all. Context is king.
Absolutely. What works wonders with a static textbook page might be counterproductive in a fast-paced, dynamic video lesson.
So a final thought maybe for you, the listener. Think about times you've learned from a screen. Have you ever consciously tried to mimic actions or trace things?
Reflect on whether that felt like it genuinely helped you lock in the information, or if it felt more like, well, an extra chore that maybe even pulled your focus away from understanding.
It's a really interesting question to ask yourself next time you're watching a tutorial or an online lesson. Did that physical interaction help or hinder?
And if you find this whole idea of mental effort and how we process information interesting, you might want to dig a bit into multimedia learning principles or cognitive load theory.
Yeah, they provide a great framework for thinking about how to learn more effectively
Mm.
and how instruction can be designed to work with our cognitive limits, not against them.